In the icy black waters of the North Atlantic, 3 Russian Borei-class nuclear submarines silently drifted at a depth of nearly 1,000 feet. Each vessel, more than 550 feet in length, and carrying 40 cruise missiles, lurked like predators beneath the surface. At precisely 4:17 a.m. on June 29, 2025, the silence was broken. All 3 subs opened their launch tubes at once, and within seconds, plumes of steam and fire erupted into the darkness. 120 Kalibr cruise missiles shot skyward, then leveled off, hugging the surface of the ocean at just 65 feet. Stabilized in formation, the missiles accelerated to nearly 600 miles per hour. They skimmed the water, like blades of steel, their fiery exhaust carving streaks across the dawnless Atlantic. Each missile carried a warhead packed with over 440 pounds of high explosives, 3 times the destructive force of a tomahawk, and every one of them was programmed for the same destination: Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, the largest U.S. Air Force installation on land. Inside the base lay over $6 billion in stealth aircraft, munitions, and radar systems. Thousands of service members were stationed there. The United States would have less than a minute to respond. As the missile swarm pushed westward, Norwegian radar operators were the first to notice faint flickers on their screens. But the Kalibrs flew too low for consistent detection. Early warning sites in Greenland and Labrador caught only fleeting signals. For minutes, the incoming strike seemed more like a ghost in the data than a tangible threat. By 4:20 a.m., the first wave had already crossed the Bahamas. They streaked toward Florida, almost invisible beneath radar coverage. At Cocoa Beach, ground-based radar finally confirmed the spread. A formation nearly 30 miles wide, moving with surgical precision. At 4:21, the alarms sounded. Sirens tore through the night air at Eglin Air Force Base. Red lights flashed inside hangars where rows of F-35s, F-22 Raptors, and MQ-9 Reapers sat on alert. Pilots, ground crews, and security forces sprinted from their bunks, strapping on helmets and sidearms as orders blared from loudspeakers. DEFCON 2. Repeat, DEFCON 2. This was an alert level only seen in times of imminent war. On the eastern edge of the base, Patriot PAC-3 MSE launchers swiveled upward. Their MPQ-65 radar locked onto the sky, sweeping in full rotations. 18 miles north, a mobile Sky Sabre system activated its Giraffe 3D radar, spinning at 60 revolutions per minute, linking with Marine Corps radars through the Link 16 network. Over the Gulf of Mexico, an E-3 Sentry early warning aircraft confirmed the nightmare. Target count exceeds 100. Low altitude. Kalibr-class cruise missiles inbound. At 4:23, ground crews scrambled to move 2 F-35As onto a secondary runway. Their pilots vaulted into cockpits even as the base vibrated with the thunder of fueling pumps and shrieking alarms. At 4:24, the first wave of missiles crossed into Florida's airspace. Patriot batteries opened fire. Streaks of flame clawed upward from the ground. From the woods north of the base, Sky Sabre interceptors screamed into the sky on V-shaped trajectories. Several collided mid-air with Kalibrs at 100 feet altitude. Explosions lit the night like miniature suns, showering debris into the forest below. 8 more missiles were shredded in bursts of flame, crashing into wetlands and pine groves, leaving trails of smoke. But too many remained. The Kalibrs weaved through radar blind spots, vanishing and reappearing on screens like phantoms. By 4:26, 72 missiles had bypassed the first defensive ring. Some altered course to avoid known interception zones, skimming just above highways, or ducking behind low ridges to stay concealed. Inside the base, loudspeakers boomed again. "Everyone to Bunker 3! Move now!" Hangar doors slammed shut, fire suppression robots activated, and technicians scrambled underground. At 4:27, suburban neighborhoods outside the base awoke to chaos. Windows shattered as missiles roared overhead at treetop level. Dogs barked, car alarms wailed, and families fled into the streets, staring at fiery contrails ripping across the sky. 1 minute later, at 4:28, the surviving Kalibrs descended for their final approach. 41 warheads slammed into Eglin almost simultaneously. The first detonations obliterated hangars, turning entire aircraft shelters into craters of fire. An F-35 reserve wing vanished in a chain of secondary explosions, hurling a fireball more than 200 feet into the sky. Ammunition depots erupted, fueling cascades of shockwaves across the tarmac. Fuel reservoirs ignited, sending black columns of smoke rising into the night. Radar towers toppled. Communications flickered. Flight control systems collapsed in an instant. In less than 10 minutes, one of America's most fortified strongholds had been gutted by steel and fire. But this was only the beginning. 18 hours later, the United States retaliated. B-2 Spirits and the newly operational B-21 Raiders lifted silently into the skies. Their target, Russian S-500 air defense installations near Murmansk. Dropping massive GBU-57 bunker busters, the bombers wiped out the entire battery, killing more than 120 Russian air defense specialists and severing Moscow's northern communications network. Meanwhile, U.S. carrier strike groups surged into the Norwegian Sea, bringing fleets within striking distance of Russian territory. The world braced for nuclear war. And yet, it didn't happen. Despite strikes on both sides, despite destruction, measured in billions of dollars and countless lives, the nuclear threshold remained unbroken. The world teetered on the edge of catastrophe, but did not fall. So what stopped the spiral? What invisible line prevented a nuclear storm from erupting? After the most devastating precision strikes of the modern era. Stay tuned, because this isn't just a story of war. It's a warning. A chilling glimpse of how quickly a high-tech conflict can descend into hell. If your heart raced at the image of missiles tearing through the night and slamming into an American base, then hit like, share, and follow now. Because what you just read was only the opening shot. What comes next will be bolder, deadlier, and far more dangerous. Sharks beneath the fog. Counterstrike from the death machines. The missiles struck Eglin, Air Force Base, like a pack of ravenous wolves. The first two slammed directly into the MQ-9 Reaper drone hangar, annihilating the central control hub and rendering the UAV fleet blind. Another missile pierced through the roof of a fuel depot, igniting a fireball that towered more than 650 feet into the air, painting the sky crimson. Successive impacts shredded runways, collapsing newly reinforced concrete, and deforming 3 F-22 Raptors that had just undergone upgrades. One Kalibr drove straight into the guided weapons testing complex, obliterating laboratories and corrupting research data vital to the next generation of U.S. air-to-ground missiles. Another tore apart the transmission hub that linked directly to NORAD, severing critical data feeds in an instant. By sheer fortune and disciplined emergency protocols, there were no fatalities. Rapid evacuation into hardened bunkers saved thousands. Still, 26 people sustained injuries, mostly from concussive shockwaves and shattered glass. 4 fighter jets were rendered beyond repair. 2 UAV hangars burned to twisted skeletons, and the entire installation was temporarily paralyzed. At 4:30 a.m., plumes of thick black smoke rose vertically above Florida. From the skies, U.S. drones captured harrowing live images: gaping craters in the runways, smoldering hangars, and an entire landscape drenched in fire and ruin. The feed streamed into the Pentagon's command center. A duty officer at Southeast Command muttered the words that echoed through the war room. Quietly but firmly, the battle has begun. By 7:40 p.m. Eastern Time, the Pentagon had already issued a counterstrike order. The electronic map projected on the command center's wall lit up with flight paths of 5 stealth bombers. 3 B-2 Spirits rose from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, while 2 of the newly minted B-21 Raiders departed California runways. Each aircraft carried the most devastating conventional weapon in the American arsenal: the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a 30,000-pound bunker buster capable of burrowing through reinforced steel and concrete before unleashing its wrath. In silence, the bombers lifted into the twilight. Their route avoided NATO airspace entirely, arcing northward over Canada before vanishing into the fog-bound skies of Greenland. Hours into the mission, 6 KC-46 Pegasus tankers rendezvoused from forward deployed bases, refueling the formation mid-air while maintaining stealth protocols. The bomber crews flew blind through darkness, unable to see their targets but knowing precisely what awaited them: the beating heart of Russia's Northern Air Defense Command. Ahead of them, electronic reconnaissance had already been at work. 2 RQ-180 stealth drones, launched earlier from Alaska, swept the Kola Peninsula with deep scans. Together with satellite imagery, they had assembled a precise 3D map of Murmansk, the nerve center of Russia's S-500 defenses. Every radar installation, every missile depot, every underground control hub was marked for destruction. For 9 hours, the stealth bombers circled the Arctic, invisible and silent, before making their final descent. At 4:51 a.m. the next morning, over the Barents Sea near Murmansk, 5 GBU-57s were released in sequence from 36,000 feet. The bombs plummeted like iron meteors. Within 10 seconds, the hillside east of Murmansk, where the command bunker was buried, erupted. The entire structure convulsed under the impact. The S-500 network collapsed instantly, its radar grid going dark. A second bomb drilled deep into a nearby missile depot just over a mile away. The result was apocalyptic. Munitions detonated in a chain reaction that shook the ground like a magnitude 6 earthquake. Underground radar stations crumbled as the shockwave tore through them. Flames and smoke plumed hundreds of feet high, blotting out the northern sky. Communications between Murmansk and Moscow went dead. Roads cracked, rail lines were severed, and the once impenetrable air defense system lay in ruins. By dawn, more than 120 personnel were confirmed dead. Soldiers, engineers, and radar operators, trapped or obliterated in their coordination centers. The Murmansk-Karelia-Arkhangelsk defensive belt had been paralyzed in a single night. NATO had not only retaliated, but chosen its strike with surgical precision, crippling Russia's northern shield at its core. From NATO's command base in Germany, senior officers immediately gave the order. Phase 2, proceed with strategic preemptive strikes. The morning of June 30th through midday July 1st marked a descent into chaos across northern Russia. The vast defense belt in Murmansk, Karelia, and Arkhangelsk fractured layer by layer. Local command posts fell silent, unable to reach Moscow. Radio transmissions faltered. Orders were delayed, lost, or contradictory. Combat units braced in tense anticipation, waiting for commands that never came. At Murmansk's naval port, crews of Borei and Yasin-class submarines were abruptly ordered to evacuate. With central guidance lost, they relied solely on internal navigation, launching in disorder. Searchlights cut jagged paths through dense fog as nuclear engines roared. 3 Borei-class submarines pushed into the Barents Sea, escorted by warships that had already lost tactical synchronization. In Arkhangelsk, chaos reigned. Transport ships attempting evacuation ran aground amid clashing directives. Warehouses were abandoned. Gas stations stood empty. No one dared refuel under constant threat of detonation. Supply convoys bound for Karelia turned back, only to collide with their own rapid response units blocking the roads. Across the north, logistics unraveled. NATO moved swiftly to exploit the fracture. Without a formal declaration, armored divisions stationed in Germany accelerated deployment eastward. The gears of escalation were grinding into motion. The risk of full-scale war. In Estonia, Latvia, and northern Norway, the roads rumbled with the iron weight of NATO armor. Hundreds of Leopard 2A7 main battle tanks, PZH-2000 self-propelled howitzers, and ANTPQ-53 battlefield radars advanced along strategic routes. There was no gunfire, only the sight of endless convoys, stretching for miles through forests and mountains. The sheer mass of war machinery a silent warning of what was to come. Inside Russia, panic spread just as quickly as NATO's armor. The Moscow financial market collapsed by 18% in a single day. Banks reported frantic withdrawals, the ruble plunged, and lines of citizens stretched around city blocks at ATMs. On television, Western outlets broadcast images of Russian families clutching their children in crowded subway stations, desperately trying to leave northern cities as rumors of escalation grew. In the Kremlin, top generals and security officials convened an emergency session that lasted through the night. The divide was stark. One faction demanded a long-range counterstrike to restore national pride. The other urged immediate negotiations before Russia lost all control of its northern frontier. The split filtered down to battlefield commanders. Orders were issued, rescinded, then reissued within the same hour, sowing confusion and hesitation. Across the front, what had once been Russia's impenetrable northern shield now appeared as a crumbling wall. Radar stations flickered on and off. High-altitude missile batteries remained unrearmed. At Olenya Air Base, sorties were cancelled as guidance signals failed. Northern Russia, a fortress for decades, suddenly felt hollow, abandoned, and exposed. The question now reverberating across Western command centers was simple. Where will the next blow fall? The threshold approaches. Less than 2 days after the Murmansk strike, Russia escalated in a way not seen in 30 years. For the first time since the Cold War, Iskander-M missile units in Karelia were placed on high alert. Convoys of trucks carrying tactical nuclear missiles crept through the forests near the Finnish border, concealed beneath camouflage netting. From the western mountains, Tu-160 and Tu-95 bombers took to the skies on combat patrol, armed with long-range cruise missiles. In the Barents Sea, Borei-class submarines loaded with Bulava missiles slipped into combat readiness. Russia's nuclear triad was no longer symbolic. It was active, visible, and ready to strike. Meanwhile, in a heavily fortified command bunker, near Moscow, the National Security Council assembled. State television broadcast footage of Topol-M missile vehicles rolling along rural roads. It was not subtle. It was a message. To NATO, to the Russian people, to the world. Moscow was prepared to act. DEFCON 2. On the American side, the Pentagon responded in kind. The United States military raised its alert level to DEFCON 2, the highest posture since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. In the Norwegian Sea, 2 aircraft carriers